Hey guys, welcome to Paint for Fun. Today I'm going to show you how to paint that sunset beach scene that I posted earlier. What we're going to need for this is some red paint, some yellow paint, blue paint. We have black and white. If you're working big, I have a small board here that I'm working with. You can use about a 1-inch flat brush for this. We're going to use this for the background. If you're working bigger, you do need this. If you're working smaller, this one's optional. I do have another medium flat brush here, and I have a round pointed brush. So these are the 3 brushes we're going to be using. I have obviously my container of water, and that's it. So let's get started. We're going to start with the sky in the background. I'm going to use my big brush for this. So we're going to create a gradient effect. We're going to start with a light orangey color. So I'm going to take some yellow, a little bit of red. Try not to go too hard on the red because it's really overpowering. You want to keep it pretty light. So we're going to mix it with a bit of white just to get a little more coverage. It'll make it a little more opaque. What I do to start is just map out where your horizon line is going to be. Don't worry about it too much if it's not perfectly straight. You can always adjust it later. What I do to create a nice horizontal horizon line is I always just take the brush and pull it really fast. So the faster you create your line, the straighter your chances are it's gonna be, okay? So once you have that horizontal line, we're gonna start with the orange. I'm gonna flip my canvas just because it's easier to work with. So I'll use that for the orange base. What I'm gonna do next is go a little bit lighter. So I won't even bother. Actually, I could rinse out my brush just a little bit. What I'm gonna do is take a little bit of yellow and white. And maybe pick up a little bit of that color that I just mixed for the orange part. Add it in there. So it's gonna create a much lighter tone. What I'm gonna do is go right over it and start blending that in. So because both layers are wet, it's easier to blend right now. I just go over that harsh line back and forth and it just disappears. So what we're gonna do next is start working at the top of the sky, and I'm gonna add a lighter pink tone. So let me just finish this off real quick, and we're gonna move to the next step. Okay, and rinse out my brush. And I'm gonna go with a light pink now for the top of the sky. So I'm gonna pick up a little bit of red, a little bit of white. And right at the top here, I'm gonna start applying a layer of pink. Now the thing about working with acrylics is that they do dry very, very fast. So if you're creating a gradient effect and you want to blend the colors while they're all still wet, you have to work pretty quickly. So you'll get used to that as you go along. I'm gonna take a little bit of white here. And you see how you have this harsh line now? I'm gonna go over it with this color. It's gonna lighten the pink slightly, and then I'll go back with the yellow because I feel like it's already dry, so it's not blending that well. So I'll show you how to create that nice smooth gradient. So here it's still a little bit wet, so it pretty much smoothed out nicely. And take a bit of that yellow, bit of white, and maybe a bit more white, and go right over here. Okay, so you get a nice smooth transition. So gradients can be a little tricky at the beginning when you first start, but as you start working more and more with your paint and you get the hang of it, you'll know how to blend your colors pretty easily. It just takes a little practice. Okay, now go back with that pink color. And right at the top here. Blend that. Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna leave that as is for now, give it a little bit of a drying break. I might just go back with a little more of a lighter tone here to even out that section. I still see a little bit of the canvas underneath. So I'm gonna give that a drying break for now. What I can do is switch to my medium brush. We're gonna add a few clouds. So I'm gonna turn my canvas around now. So we're gonna start with some lighter clouds on the right-hand side. What I can do is pick up a little bit of that light yellow, add a bit of that peachy color that we just did to it. And what I start doing is literally just dabbing with the corner of my brush. Now they're really, really subtle. I want to keep them subtle. I don't want it to be too overpowering. I want to have this like softness to them. Maybe pick up a little more white. So what I do when I create clouds is I use the corner of my brush and I'm literally just dabbing it on. And I'm always keeping the shape really, really random because when you're making clouds, you don't want them to be perfect. You want some areas to have like really high peaks and then dip down, come back up again to create a more natural effect. So have fun with it. I usually keep the base of the clouds pretty horizontal. I want the line to be pretty horizontal like this. So I always start really fluffy at the top. I kind of taper them off at the end, just like so. And then at the bottom, I kind of usually just very gently give it this sort of wispiness. So I kind of brush over them very, very gently, horizontally. Kind of creates this softness to it. And also I never use a lot of paint for this. Very, very, very little paint on my brush. I can add another one underneath if I'd like. So it's almost like my brush is pretty much dry. I'm just staining the canvas. Kind of twist it as I go along too, just to create different effects. And again, you can create those nice soft horizontal lines. Just pull it slightly, very gently with your brush. Okay, so we're gonna stop there for now. We're gonna work on the opposite side now. So I'm gonna rinse out my brush. We're gonna add some darker clouds on the left-hand top corner. They're gonna be more of a purple tone. So to create purple, I'm gonna mix a little bit of red, tiny bit of blue. Don't go too harsh on the blue because it's very overpowering. You wanna have more of a warm purple tone. If you added too much blue and you feel like you can't correct the color, just scrap it and start over in another section. Okay, so we don't need, again, a lot of paint for this. I wanna remove the excess paint on my brush. I want my brush to be almost dry. So I'm taking off the excess. Might put a little more red in there. Take off the excess paint. And very gently just start dabbing at the top here. Same principle, same concept. Again, if you want to alter a brush or use another brush for this, you can experiment and see what works best for you. I always just like using the medium brush because I can kind of twist it as I go along. And once I have less and less paint on my brush, I'm just gonna taper off the cloud. Make the end of it nice and pointy. And you can fluff up the top a little more. So I'm gonna leave it as is for now. We're gonna add some highlights to the clouds. So I'm gonna rinse out my brush, go with a lighter purple now. So I'm gonna just take some more white paint, a little bit of that purple color, and I might mix a little more red to it to make a more pink tone. So very little paint. What I'm doing, because we're gonna be making a sunset, the sun's gonna be at the bottom, setting over the sea. So the light source is coming from underneath. So if I wanna create some highlights, it's a little too much paint, I'm gonna go from underneath here. So what I do is I'm literally, same concept, I'm just dabbing paint on. And again, if you feel like you went too light in certain areas, or you put too much paint, you can always correct it. So don't worry about that too much. Like, I feel like this might be a little too light, so I will go back with some darker purple afterwards. You can really correct anything you do, so don't stress too much if you make a little mistake. There's no such thing as mistakes. Everything happens for a reason, and everything you can correct. Okay, so I'm gonna stop there for now. And go back with the darker one a little bit. Just kind of darken some areas here. So I'm gonna rinse out my brush now, add some highlights to the lighter yellow clouds. So I'm just gonna take a bit of white for this. Not a lot of paint at all. And right underneath here, same concept. I'm just gonna start dabbing these little curved lines. Okay, so I'm gonna go back with maybe a little more of that yellow color. And just touching up little areas at the top here. So just keep playing with them until you're satisfied with the outcome. And then you can move on. Like I said, I might take a little break from the sky and then come back to it a little bit later just to fill in that area. We're gonna add the sun to that. We're gonna work on the water soon. Okay, so let's get started on the water. What we're gonna do is create a base color and then we're gonna add all the waves. So for the base color, I wanna create a sort of a pinkish peachy tone. So I'm gonna take some red and white, add a little bit of yellow to that. And you could start by retracing the horizon line. Again, don't worry about it too much. If it's not super perfect, we're gonna keep adding lines to it. So as we add the lines, you can always readjust. So let's go a little more peachy, a little more red. Okay, happy with that. So we're gonna fill in the rest of the canvas. I'm actually gonna use my big brush for this, so it goes a little bit faster. Just applying a base coat, and then I'll show you how to add all the waves. So when we mix a little more of that color, we have that red, white, tiny bit of yellow. Okay, so here we go. Fill that all in. You can go all the way to the bottom with this. So when I'm filling in the water section, I'm also gonna start creating these horizontal lines. Because the paint is still wet, it's kind of picking it up from underneath and you're gonna start seeing these streaks. I don't mind that. I'm not gonna get rid of them because it's gonna give it the illusion of waves. So I'm gonna keep this. So don't worry about it too much if you don't have perfect coverage. We're going to be working with a lot of different colors, so you'll get full coverage by the end of this. Again, I don't mix my colors well on my plate, so everyone's going to have different tones, which I like to see on my painting. Okay, so here we go. Fill that in a little more. Again, I'm always starting to create these lines with my brush, back and forth, kind of give it the illusion of waves. Even if it's super subtle, it's always gonna add to the painting at the end. So you'll always get all these undertones, which you'll see through layers of color. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going back and forth, and that's pretty much it. So I'm gonna forget about the big brush for now. For the rest of the painting, we're gonna be working with the medium brush and the small brush. What we're gonna start doing is adding some color to this. So we're gonna add some waves in different tones. We're gonna start light and then work our way to the darker waves. So to start, I'm gonna go with, let's say, this peachy color that I just created. I'm gonna add a little more red to it. So we're gonna go a little bit of a deeper tone. So red, yellow, a little bit of white. Make sure it's a little bit darker than the base that you just had on. Okay, let's try this. So this is very, very subtle, which is fine. Okay, we're gonna start subtle and work our way. Might do a little more red to this. Okay, so the idea is whatever wave you have in the background, it's gonna be very, very thin and less spaced out. So you're gonna have a lot of lines in the background. The idea is also you want to keep the center of your painting very light because we're going to be adding the sun here and you want the reflection of the light to be on the water. So you want your lightest part of the water to be in the center. All of the sides are going to be, each of the sides are going to be darker. So when you're adding your waves, because we're working light right now, I can go all the way through. So I'm not going to be adding too many in the center. I'm going to add very, very thin, delicate lines in the center, broken lines. And I'm going to start to fill it in a little more towards each of the sides. Okay, so what I do is I just very gently pull the paint. Keep them horizontal, nice and straight. Don't make them too wavy. You want it to kind of look like a nice calm ocean. I'm going to start pulling back and forth here very gently. Not a lot of pressure on the brush. You could start to really create really thin lines with a flat brush. It's all about the pressure. The more pressure you apply, the thicker your line's gonna be. The less pressure you apply, the thinner your line's gonna be. So as I start to get lower and lower towards the shoreline, my waves are gonna get a little bit thicker. Okay, so keep in mind that the lines that you make in the background are going to be a lot thinner than the ones in the foreground. And also, as we start getting closer to the shoreline, we're going to start angling the waves as well. So it kind of looks like it's breaking towards the shore. Continue here, just add a couple of little ones. So as you see, as I'm getting lower, I'm applying a little more pressure on my brush. So what I do is whenever I want a thicker line, I press down a little bit more to create that thickness, and then let's say I want to thin it out, I kind of pick it up to create a thinner area. Keep working with that, and once you're happy with it, you could also just pull on the sides a little bit to kind of darken the edges of your painting. And I'm going to pull down a bit. Again, always keep in mind that the center of the painting will be the lightest part, so you can always gently, when you don't have a lot of paint on your brush left, gently just pull it on each of the sides and leave the center as light as possible. Also, a thing to keep in mind is when you're making all these lines, try to make sure they're like very different. You want some lines to be a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, kind of to make it look a little more natural. That way, if you make them all exactly the same and space them out exactly the same, it won't look realistic. So the more variety you have in your lines, the more realistic it'll look. Okay, so I'm gonna stop there for now. I'm gonna add more of an orange tone now. So we had more of this pinkish tone. We're gonna go with a little bit more of an orange. So I'm gonna do a little bit more red and yellow. Start, it's really subtle, but whatever colors you're working with in the sky, that's what's going to be reflected in the water. So that's what's fun about this painting. You can make your water very, very colorful, which is super nice. So I'm going with more of an orange tone here. It is, again, quite subtle, but it'll still give it a little pop. So I'm just going right in between the shapes here that I just created, adding more lines. You can even make some more in the center here because they are fairly light, so. That's it. So next color we're gonna work with, we're gonna start getting into the purple tones now. So start with a light purple. So if you have some purple left over from the clouds, you can use that. Pick up another section of your plate, take some of that purple color and mix a little bit more white in there. A little bit of red. Okay, so let's start with this and see how this looks down on the canvas. All right, and I might go a little more red for this. Okay, so let's go here and very gently start pulling your color in. Start at the horizon line. Again, the lines in the background, you're gonna have a little more. They're gonna be less spaced out. Very thin, and drag your brush horizontally to create all these little waves. You can add a couple in the center, but again, keep it very light. I'm going to start pulling here at the bottom, starting to angle it a little more, making my waves look like they're crashing on the shore. So I'm angling my brush slightly. Again, you can make them a little bit thicker at the bottom here. Okay, so I'm gonna add a little more purple on each of the sides. I'm just gonna pull it in a bit towards the center, not going all the way, just to kind of darken it slightly on each of the sides. A little more here as well, not too much. All right, so let's go dark now. I'm gonna rinse out my medium brush and I'm gonna make a darker purple. So what I'm gonna do is mix some blue and red. All right, so for the dark lines now, again, wipe off the excess paint because we don't want it to overpower everything. This is where everything's gonna start to pop. So again, in the background, I'm gonna start with these very, very thin lines. What we're doing is just adding layers and layers of color. Go a little bit more delicately towards the center. I'm gonna pick up some more paint here. And again, just start adding these little broken lines. As they get lower, start to get thicker. Space them out a little more. continue all the way down. And really start to thicken them at the bottom here. So this is gonna make it look like they're breaking on the shore. I'm gonna mix a little more paint. If you want to add a little tiny bit of white to it just to make it more opaque, you can. Still want to keep it fairly dark though. Wipe off the excess, and here we go. So again, I'm always working with the pressure of my brush. I'm always pressing down when I want a thicker line. I'm picking it up when I want a thinner line. Okay, so just go back and forth till you're happy with it. Okay, so the more contrast you have, the more it's gonna pop. So the dark purple is really what makes it start to come together. So like I said, the horizon line, I'm kind of just tapering it off here towards the center. I'm not gonna go dark in the center because, like I said earlier, I want my sun to be there and the reflection on the water. I want to keep it very light. And also, if you feel like you want to add more of a color or you covered something a little too much, you can always go back and forth. So don't worry. I mean, just have fun with it, you know? You can always correct. Just gonna add very thin ones delicately towards the center, not making it too dark. So I'm gonna stop there, rinse out my brush. Now we're gonna go lighter. Create some highlights on this water. So what I'm gonna do to start is maybe create a really light pink. So a bit of white, tiny bit of red. Want it to be fairly light, so make a nice baby pink. And we're gonna start adding some highlights to this. So again, start in the background, very gently. If you add too many or you feel like it's too intense, you can always go back. So I feel like this might be a little too white. I don't mind it for now, but I might add some more red to it later. So let's start with working with this for now in the background. Now you can start really creating like all these little tiny broken lines here and there. Again, keep the sides of it a little bit darker. Try to keep your lighter bits in the center to add to that reflection. Very gently, pull the paint. I'm gonna add just a little bit here on the sides, not too much. We're still gonna go back with some other colors as well, and I don't want it to kind of tone down all of the undertones that we have here because it's looking really nice as is. Okay. So again, it's always very delicately. Take your time with it, don't rush. If you want to take a break and go get back to it later, you can. It always helps also to look at it with fresh eyes to see where you want to add or adjust. Okay, so I'm gonna leave that as is. I'm gonna go back with like a light yellow tone now to pick up more of the sky color. So a little bit of yellow, a little bit of white. I'm not gonna put too much of this. It might be a little too intense, so I'm gonna tone it down with a bit of red. Okay, let's try this color. Okay, I like this. So this is gonna pick up some more of the sky color. I'm just gonna add a couple lines here and there. I'm not gonna go too intensely with this. That. I feel like I covered some of that dark purple line a little too much, so I'm going to go back in and retrace it. So now's the part where whatever you want to adjust, you can go back to. If you're happy with it, leave it as is. If there's a section that you want to touch up, go for it. If you want to add more lines, add more lines. We're pretty much done with the water right now. I might add a couple of more highlights to it with some white paint just in the center where we're gonna add the sun. So I'm gonna just take a little bit of white paint and really just add a couple of really bright highlights in the center. Okay, so before we get to the sand, let's add the sun now. I'm gonna use my little brush for this. If you're working big, you can use your medium brush. Also, if you are working big and you wanna create a larger sun, what I do usually, a trick is I take a little bit of white paint on my brush. I just hold the brush and turn it on its axis to get a nice circle. So that's a trick that I use to create a nice circular shape. You can freehand it as well. Because I'm working smaller, I will be using the small brush for this. So I just twist it in the paint. And since we're doing white on a darker orange ground, I can just start doing the circle. If I see that the coverage is not that great, I can always go back and touch it up after. So just create that circular shape. It helps also to put some water in the paint. Get it a little more liquidy to get a nice curved line, a nice clean line. So like I said, if it's not, the coverage is not great at the beginning, you could let it dry for a little bit and then go back afterwards and add another coat to it. If your base of the canvas is dry by now, which should be, you could also put your hand down on the canvas to kind of hold your hand steady. Okay, so I'll leave that as is for now, and we'll start working on the sand. So for the sand, medium brush, because there's just a little section left, it's just going to be some black paint. You could add a bit of red to it to give it more of a warm tone, but it won't be very noticeable. It's just black and add a bit of red to it just to give it some warmth. Fill in the rest of the canvas to the bottom. I might take my big brush for this just because it'll go a little bit faster. So I'm going to take some of that black paint, mix it with a tiny, tiny bit of red, and then fill in the rest of it. I'm working on this canvas board, so I like getting the bottom of it as well, where the canvas wraps stretched over the board. And stick it in all those little crevices. So here we go, and fill in this shape. Okay, so we're gonna start working on the palm trees now, which is the last step. So what I'm gonna do is use my medium brush for the main stem, and then I'm gonna use my little brush. Now, whatever you're comfortable with. If you wanna do the whole thing with the medium brush, I find the bristles are firmer on the medium brush, so it's easier to create a nice curved line with it, and you could get really skinny lines with it as well, which is great. I also like adding just a tiny bit of water to my paint to make it a little more liquidy. For the leaves, I'm going to show you how I do that with the small brush. So to start, I'm just going to start by creating a curved line wherever you want on the canvas. So let's say I do one there, leave that as is. And now I'm going to switch to my little brush. You could also use your medium brush for it if you're comfortable with it and to make the little palms, but if you want to switch to your small brush, switch to your small brush. I am working small, like I said, so the small brush is going to be convenient for me. If you are working a little bit bigger, you can use your medium brush for it because you can create really nice thin lines with it. So I kind of twist my paint. I twist my brush in my paint, pick up a little bit of black paint here, and very gently I'm going to start creating these curved lines. So I always start from the center, from the main branch, and I just curve them outwards. Okay, very wispy, very delicately. I'm gonna twist it in there a little bit more. And if they start overlapping, that's fine too. Make them go in different directions if you want. And keep at it till you're all the way at the top. So what I like doing is when I add the water in the paint, it kind of gives it that liquid eyeliner consistency, which is easier to work with for me personally. I feel like you could get some nice wispy lines with it. Okay, so go all the way to the top. You can again mix them, go in different directions to make it look a little more natural. And then once you're done with one side, we're gonna work with the other side. So I might add another one here. A couple of thin ones to kind of fill it out. And you can add some more here on the other side. Again, always curving outwards. Always pick up your brush at the end to create that nice fine point. Okay, so we're going to do the other one as well. Same concept. Start here at the bottom and start by curving your lines very gently. I'm barely applying any pressure on my brush, and work your way all the way up. Hang of it, just get the hang of it. When you're comfortable, you could hit up on the canvas. Do the opposite side as well. It's almost like a feather that we're creating, or like we're making eyelashes. Start from the main stem and pull down and curve it. Pull down, curve it. Until you get to the top. So you can start putting some different directions. And that's it. So there you have it. That's the sunset beach painting. Hope you enjoyed. If you try this out, post your photos. I'd love to see your results. If you want to change up the colors, you can play with any sunset colors you'd like. And like and subscribe our channel. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for watching.